Welcome everyone to a new episode of Disclosed TV News, and today we will be taking a look at debunking the media's horrible misrepresentation and lies about Einstein for decades. So today we'll be doing Debunking Einstein. Now I don't know if anyone's heard about this theory before, and to be honest it is just a theory, but I've collected a whole crap load of evidence and I'll be sharing it with you today to prove what the media has been telling us about Einstein for decades is a lie. So let's begin. What is the biggest thing about Einstein that I believe is a lie? And the first thing that got my attention was the story today on the news from CNN discovering the first photo of a black hole supports Einstein's theory of relativity. So right off the bat we can debunk the CNN article by saying, hey, Einstein's theory of relativity does not exist. Einstein did not come up with the theory of relativity. He did not write it. It was other scientists that he stole it from. And we'll be going over the evidence for that right now. But before we do, let's just cover the CNN story a little bit to see what evidence they have for Einstein's theories. And what I'm saying here too is that I'm a big advocate for gravity well research. I research it all the time. I do a show on gravity. You can check it out in the archives. But when it comes to Einstein's theories of gravity, I've never really taken much consideration to them, because usually when I go to the world's most advanced theoretical physics lab called the, the Stephen Hawking Center, just a couple blocks from my house. So what I do is I go there and I hang out with the most advanced scientist labs in the entire country. So I went there and I asked some of the scientists how has their theories been going studying Einstein's work. And they say, boy, Einstein's work is so great, but the more they look at it, it's just a dead end. They said no one's made any correlations to prove Einstein correct or wrong, and none of his math is really adding up, and it doesn't help solve anything. So I was like, really? You guys have been working on all this stuff for generations, like decades, and no progress has been made whatsoever since Einstein. And they're like, nope, not really. It's all pretty much just Einstein's work and it doesn't make any sense. So I was like, okay, let's look into it a little bit deeper. Now, a lot of people argue that black holes don't exist. Personally, I believe that they do, but it's up to you. Just the evidence I'm going on is a lot of the Hubble images and how things react around like these big black nothingnesses. So the first image of a black hole captured in 2019 has revealed more support for Albert Einstein's theory of general relativity. So I was thinking these theories about gravity and all this stuff is cool, but a lot of it is so basic and so mistranslated that we really don't understand any of it at this point. We have no idea how gravity works, we don't understand gravity wells, and no scientists are any closer to making any progress since the days of Einstein. So we've been basically pumping millions of dollars, billions, all these labs and things that are being built, and nothing is getting accomplished. Alright, so what this article is showing, I guess I'll show it a little bit more. It shows, instead of black holes and light, it shows the bending and all that sort of stuff. And when I research gravity wells here on the Earth, I notice that there is patterns that you can correlate from gravity wells. So I believe this is pretty correct. The only thing that I would argue with these gravity well researchers is they're showing large objects having one gravity well field. And I do not believe that is correct. I believe that each body in our solar system or anything in the world has multiple gravity well points. It's not just one. So maybe Einstein actually did have that in part of his theories. I don't know. I haven't really gotten that deep into them. I don't know. I'm just going by like a lot of the models and images they show. It always shows one gravity well per body, and I don't think that's correct. Alright, but before I get into more of my theories about gravity and stuff, let's get into some proving that what the media has been saying about Einstein is complete bullshit. Alright, let's get on to first about Einstein's theory of relativity, or maybe should I get into Einstein's background in general? Alright, let's go into Einstein's background in general. Now you can see here in Einstein's biography thing, they list 2 spouses. And the reason for this is Einstein married someone who was very smart, a woman who apparently a lot of the feminists I've spoke to was responsible for all of his scientific work. That he was taking advantage of the women in his life, taking their work, and then taking credit for it. And some of the evidence for this is when it came to Einstein winning the Nobel Prize for one of his theories, he promised the money for that award to his ex-wife, and people are saying he did that because she did all the work. He just copied it. So I don't know, if people haven't heard the history of Einstein, let's get into when he was a kid. And people will sometimes call, like when they have a kid that is really slow at learning, can't even speak until he's almost 5, they called it Einstein Syndrome, because apparently Einstein was the same way. He was extremely slow as a child, and he wasn't even able to speak until he was almost 5. So people kind of switched this and said that Einstein Syndrome, you shouldn't freak out, because, where is it? Language delay isn't what you think. So what the media tried to say is when you have really slow language development and stuff, it actually means that you're a genius, because that's what happened with Einstein. But I don't believe that's true. I believe what happened is Einstein was very slow at the beginning because he had autism. And back in those days, they didn't really know anything about autism. So Einstein would have been one of the first people to be well diagnosed with like advanced autism. And yeah, so they tried to define this language delay thing as saying that it's actually just being a genius or whatever. But it turns out the characteristics for Einstein Syndrome actually also match the characteristics for autism. So let's go over some of those. It says that Einstein Syndrome gives you outstanding, precocious, analytical, musical abilities. You've probably heard that some people with autism are like the best musical instrument players. So there's evidence there that Einstein had autism. Outstanding memory. I don't know if you've heard about some people with autism, they're able to memorize entire phone books. Like I used to work with a guy who had, just like Einstein, had the same autism, and he was a fucking genius too. Not that he was like IQ smart and he could hold conversations with people smart, but say you asked him like, hey, we'll make up a name for him, Steve. Be like, hey Steve, it's like, who won the Super Bowl in 1968? And then Steve would tell you in the lunchroom without even looking it up. He'd be like, it was like the Bulls, or the Buffalo Bills versus the Dallas Cowboys. The score was 16 to 40, and the weather was like 13 degrees. The game ended at 6 o'clock. It's like he could tell you every fact about the entire Super Bowl. I was like, holy shit, like how is this guy memorizing that stuff? Turns out he has advanced autism. So when you have like outstanding memory, that's a sign that you have autism. Strong-willed behavior. I don't know if you've hung out with any people with autism before, but that describes them exactly. Very selective interest. The guy that I knew with the autism only liked football, nothing else. So it's like, yeah, he had, well, no, I think it was sports. He liked sports, he liked football, but anything else he was really against, like TV shows and anything like that. Alright, so Einstein was apparently very slow at potty training. So yeah, not only could he not speak, but he also wasn't able to even go to the washroom properly. Yes, he had this specific ability to read and use numbers or a computer. You've noticed that that's very common with people with autism as well. Some of them are like geniuses when it comes to electronics and computers. Right here it says that close relatives will also have these advanced features. Well, I was thinking maybe autism is hereditary? I don't know. I'll have to check into that. I don't think it is. Let me check. Alright, I was able to find out here, according to the Autism Society, in many families there appears to be a pattern of autism or related disabilities, further supporting the theory that the disorder does have a genetic basis. While no one gene has been identified as the causing autism, researchers are searching for irregular segments of genetic code that children with autism may have inherited it. So that's one of the things, like Einstein, I don't know if you've heard about his family and stuff, but in the media tries to portray Einstein's family as all geniuses, the greatest, smartest people in the world. Really nice. Well, it turns out that's not the case. Alright, let's see if we can find it. Alright, so this was one of the ones that was just talking about the information to prove that some people considered that his wife had come up with the idea because in the divorce settlement he gave all the money for discovering it to her. And then the authors claim that Einstein himself took great care to cover his tracks and procession of his secretaries, relative, and keepers of the flame so that he could continue the deception. So that's pretty interesting right there. Like, there's the proof that, oh yeah, I should get into it first if I'm going to show the proof. So I don't know, has anyone heard of Henry Poincaré or Poincaré? I'll bring his Wikipedia page up because this is the guy that actually discovered Einstein's theory of relativity. And we'll just zoom down to the end. This guy was an actual genius. He didn't have autism. He was able to speak right away. Doesn't have these super abilities of like autistic people. He was like a regular scientist. So here it shows that Poincaré was working on relativity for a long time, and he was also familiar with Lorentz, and this Lorentz guy was also working on some of the stuff for relativity. So Poincaré and Lorentz had these different ideas. They were working back and forth. And then here comes the controversy with Poincaré and Einstein. I'll make it a little bit bigger so you guys can see it. So right here, this isn't any proof for me making it up or anything. This is right from the official pages. It says Einstein's first paper on relativity was published 3 months after Poincaré wrote a short paper all about it and gave it to Einstein to a patent office. Because Einstein worked at the patent office, so he was literally taking Poincaré's work, memorizing it, and then releasing it 3 months later and just copied his whole page. So, but before Poincaré's longer version. So that's what he did. It's like Poincaré was working on a longer version. He gave Einstein the earlier version short paper, and Einstein copied it all and released his work before Poincaré could release the long version. So Einstein relied on the principle of relativity to derive the Lorentz transformations and used a similar synchronization procedure. So you can see Einstein didn't come up with this. This was Lorentz's transformation, which later became called Einstein synchronization. Alright, and it says here that what Einstein wrote had a similar clock synchronization procedure to the one that Poincaré had described, but Einstein's paper was remarkable that it contained no references at all. So that's like a giant red flag. When there's a scientist who said he came up with an amazing theory, but he can't offer any references to where he got it from, that's big red flag. That's like giant flag saying, hey, I stole someone else's idea and are claiming it as my own. So yeah, that's the proof right here. We have it on record that Einstein was not the first to come up with relativity, and the theory he did have was just copied from other people. So now I don't know if you've noticed, but with autism in people, like, they're usually a little bit not able to get around people socially as well, but they have that super ability to memorize stuff. So I was thinking Einstein had it made where he was getting all this information at the patent office, he could memorize it, and then when he presented it to people, it's like he actually had the entire paper memorized word for word. So he did sound like a genius. He could probably recite Poincaré's work even better than he could. So that's where Einstein sort of had an edge, is like he had this super memory ability. But yeah, so it was funny, like this point care guy. It's like Einstein, when people asked Poincaré what he thought of Einstein, he would be like, no comment. He doesn't even want to talk about his fights with Einstein. So I was like, man, that's pretty wild. Alright, here we got another thing about the bottom line of this Einstein Syndrome thing. It says, although they have a lot of information. Here, I'll make it a little bit larger so you guys can see it. So it goes a long way, this paper, of explaining the phenomenon known as Einstein Syndrome, but there hasn't been enough research for it to be conclusive. So basically what they're saying is this Einstein theory or syndrome is basically bullshit. They don't have any evidence that it's an actual syndrome. It's more likely autism. So I don't know, like I'm pretty sure like over the years the media should have just came out and said, hey, Einstein wasn't a genius, he had autism, and he was copying and stealing everyone's work. But for some reason they've tried to keep this myth alive that Einstein was like this genius. Oh yeah, and the other thing was the story about Einstein always being the great womanizer. Everyone's talking about how he's sleeping with all the babes and he was like the greatest womanizer to ever live. And he was a really nice guy about it. So, well, let's look it up, and there happens to be an article called The Dark Side of Einstein. Let's see here. So, what we find out in, I guess this is his diaries or whatever they had, like love letters between. Alright, so here's in 1914, Albert Einstein wrote to his first wife, the mathematical genius that was coming up with all the actual work. And he wrote this to her about demands that he had in the marriage. And he put to his wife that you will see to it that my clothes and linens are kept in order, and then I'm served 3 regular meals a day in my room. You will renounce all personal relations with me, except when these are required to keep up social appearances. So you can see here that Einstein is a big fraud, and he's always trying to lie and cover up what he's doing. You will, here it says too, you will expect no affection from me, and you must leave my bedroom or study at once without protesting when I ask you to. So he had a bunch of other like stuff, like he's a total womanizer, but I was thinking like maybe to Einstein's defense that wasn't really such a bad thing in his day, because like a lot of men were like that back then. I guess they still are in different parts of the world. Right, so I was thinking that kind of interesting, and I talked to a few feminists and they would go on and on and on about how Einstein actually wasn't smart and it was his wife's the whole time. But the thing that I didn't agree with that is like, sure, his wives were smart, but still they didn't come up with the ideas either. It was that Poincaré guy and Lawrence. It had nothing to do with any of the Einstein family. They were the ones copying it and publishing it, but they didn't write or create any of it. Yeah, so then when I found out about this Einstein being the most amazing womanizer, he'd go around getting all the babes, it turned out he wasn't womanizing with babes and stuff. It's like he had like a really ugly wife. Well, I shouldn't say that. Maybe in those days without makeup and stuff, she was really good looking. But, no, but anyways, like, while he was married, he was constantly having affairs. It turns out he wasn't having affairs with babes and stuff. It's like he was having affairs with his cousins. He was an inbreeder. I was like, oh, so here we've heard Einstein's this great womanizer, but no, he wasn't womanizing the babes. He was into incest. He was having sex with his first cousins. So I was like, man, that's fucking nasty, right? Like, I can't believe the media portrayed Einstein for years as this great womanizer, getting all the babes. Meanwhile, he's fucking sleeping with his ugly cousins. So I was like, oh my god, it's like, some of the stuff they're telling people about is just bullshit. Alright, so that was some of the dark side about him. Alright, we'll see what I got next. Alright, here I found some more of the articles talking about Einstein's marriages and what happened with this womanizing that he was doing. So it says that Einstein conceived an illegitimate daughter with a woman he later married, and the baby girl was soon sent away for adoption. So he wasn't really the greatest father. And then they explained how Einstein's marriage collapsed after he started an affair with his cousins. And then after the divorce, he married his cousins. So I was like, man, like this one cousin had Einstein's last name. She got married to someone else, then got divorced. And then when she got married back to Einstein, she got her name back. So I was like, isn't that fucked? It's like you went to having a different last name and then you did incest and got your own name back. And then one of the last doctors to see Einstein alive said that it looked like that a lot of his mental issues were actually because he had syphilis. So that's why he was acting so weird and stuff in public. People are saying too that Einstein's famous for being smart, but he actually never did in public lectures. So everyone's just sort of taken that on a grain of salt. They don't really know. We don't have any proof of Einstein doing these lectures. And from what we can tell, he was just repeating documents that he had memorized from other people. So I highly doubt he would be a good teacher, because having a textbook memorized and actually understanding it are two different things. So that's why I'm pretty sure that Einstein's theories never went anywhere, is because he was just copying other people's work. He wasn't taking these theories and expanding on them. Alright, so next, I was just going to go over in this article too. Here it says that his marriage in 1903 and 1919 covered the most important period of his life, when he formulated his special and general theories of relativity, basically copied them for Lorentz and Poincare. And she is believed, his wife, to provided more than emotional support, being an accomplished physicist herself. So when Einstein was memorizing all these books and didn't understand them, he had his wife to fall back on, because she actually understood it. And then she later claimed to be the unrecognized author of Relativity, and perhaps Einstein recognized her contribution by giving her all of the Nobel Prize money as the divorce settlement. Yeah, so then here it says, Einstein took great care to cover all of his tracks and keep as many secrets as he could. He lived a life of deception. Now, I'm pretty sure people have probably heard the media go on and on about not only was Einstein this incredible genius, but his family was like the smartest people in the world or something. So I was checking to see if any of that's true. And it turns out, let's read here what it says. An illegitimate child, a first marriage that ended in acrimony, a second that was undermined by adultery, and it says here Einstein's first son died ignored in a mental institution. So I was like, holy crap, it's like not only was Einstein's relatives not like these amazing geniuses, but they were borderline fucking insane. They were spending their time in mental institutions. So I was like, isn't that funny? They go on and on about the Einsteins being the ultimate gods, smartest people in the world, but they're in mental institutions. Not to make fun of people in mental institutions, but geez, that's like quite the opposite of what the media has been telling us, right? Now, just to summarize this episode on Einstein and how the media has completely lied and covered it up, everything that we've known about Einstein for decades, but I don't want to be just completely bashing him, because really I've never met Einstein before, and he was probably a pretty nice guy to some people at least. Maybe not to his wives, but... But anyways, yeah, so I'm not going to totally rip on him, and I'm a big fan of gravity research, and Einstein was, I guess, a big fan of the research as well, although he managed to copy a lot of it and say that it was all his. That's not the first time people have done that in history, so maybe we shouldn't rip on him so much. And I'm pretty sure, like, with his autism and stuff, I know a lot of people rip on autistic people, but man, all the autistic people I've known are usually pretty cool people, so I'm not even going to try to say that autism is bad or anything. But what I'm saying is that Einstein is definitely a lot different from what the media has been portraying him for decades. And I figured today, with that news coming out about the gravity well and stuff, it's like the emperor's lost his clothes. Like, a lot of this stuff in our world we're starting to see isn't quite like we've been told it was. And we're starting to get to the bottom of a lot of things. So maybe this is good news. Like, maybe we don't have to rip on Einstein for being such a weird guy and copying all this stuff and getting all this credit. Maybe he was just doing what he had to do. It's like back in those days, you're going through the world wars and stuff, so I'm sure maybe he was just doing a lot of this stuff to cope with what was going on, right? Like being in Germany, having to leave because of the war and all this stuff. Maybe he did it because he really wanted to help the war cause. And if him playing the role of the super genius help the war effort, then maybe it was worth it, right? So I don't know, like, I just wanted to share my evidence for different theories about what Einstein was really about. Was he this super genius that his brain should be studied, or was he autistic? And maybe we can learn a lot more from autism here, and then maybe it just goes to show autism really isn't the end of our society, that maybe we will get even more super geniuses that are autistic. And like, have you ever seen that autistic guy that can draw an entire New York skyline from memory? It's pretty wild. And what he was saying too is that he needs, what is it, 8 or 15. He has a specific number of minutes that he has to look at something, and then when he does it for that long, that's long enough for him to memorize every detail, every window, every crack. So it's like, it's pretty amazing, right? So maybe that's like the future of computers and technology and the human brain. We're going to find out exactly how the human brain works, what it's capable of, especially when it's topped out, when it's like has autism. Alright, so thanks for everyone for watching this episode, and I'm not officially associated with Disclosed TV News, but I figure since Disclosed TV is getting a big boost, they've managed to update their website to show how many views, how many comments, everything, and I think the website's got a lot of potential. So I appreciate everyone for watching this episode. If you want to see me do more paranormal research about different topics, just let me know in the chat. I do everything from gravity wells, ghosts, ancient mysteries, you name it, paranormal topics, crop circles, even artificial gravity. What is it? Yeah, gravity wells are one of my favorite. I'll include the link for that as well. Alright, so thanks everyone for watching the show. And I don't have any sponsors, but maybe I will in the future. So I'll just wrap up the show right now and say thanks for watching, everyone. And big shout out to Disclosed TV News. See you next episode. Bye for now. Here's 3 videos at the same time. Actually 2 videos and 1 subscribe.